Have you ever forgotten to lock your door? That brief jolt of panic. The rush of what-if scenarios flooding your mind. For most of us, a locked door is a non-negotiable part of daily life. But what if I told you there's a place where this feeling doesn't exist? I first heard about it from an old traveler I met, a woman with eyes that held 1,000 stories. She spoke of a village, nestled so deep in a forgotten valley that it felt like a secret whispered by the wind. She called it Ethelgard, though she admitted that wasn't its real name. In Ethelgard, she said, trust was the only currency that mattered, and fear was a foreign language. The idea was so radical, so contrary to everything I knew, I had to see it for myself. Finding it was an adventure in itself. The roads got narrower, the GPS signal vanished, and I had to rely on vague directions and the kindness of strangers. Finally, after a long journey, I saw it. It looked like a postcard from a bygone era. As I walked into the village square, the first thing I noticed was the doors. They were all slightly ajar, inviting the breeze, the sunlight, and perhaps the neighborly chat. My first few hours were strange. I felt like a trespasser, every instinct screaming at me that this was wrong, this was unsafe. I rented a small room at the village's only guest house. The innkeeper, a warm, smiling woman named Alara, handed me a simple iron key. But as she did, she laughed softly and said, "It's more for show, dear. We haven't had to use one in generations." Feel at home, I felt more on edge than ever. That night, I lay in bed, listening to the gentle sounds of the village, the creak of a distant gate, the murmur of late-night conversations drifting through open windows. I even wedged a chair under the doorknob, a habit I couldn't shake. The next morning, I decided to understand why. Why here? What made this small community immune to the anxieties that plagued the rest of the world? I started by talking to the locals. I met an old carpenter named Finn, his hands weathered by decades of work. I asked him, "Aren't you ever afraid that someone might walk in and take something?" A loot at me, not with judgment, but with genuine curiosity, as if I'd asked why the sun rises in the east. He gestured to his workshop, its doors wide open, tools hanging neatly on the walls. "Take what?" he asked. "My tools. My neighbor knows how to use them just as well as I do. It's made for the people here. My food. If someone is hungry, they need only ask. What is there to take that isn't already shared?" His words hit me. It wasn't about a lack of valuable items. It was about a fundamentally different understanding of ownership. Here, possessions were not fortresses to be defended. They were resources to be shared. The community was an extension of the family. You don't lock your bedroom door to your own children, do you? In Ethelgard, the entire village was one household. This philosophy was woven into the very fabric of their lives. I saw it everywhere. A farmer would leave a basket of fresh vegetables on his porch, and throughout the day, people would take what they needed. There was no cashier, no camera, no security. The children ran freely, their laughter echoing through the streets. They would wander into any house for a glass of water or a story from an elder. Every adult was a guardian, every home a safe haven. This wasn't neglect. It was collective parenting. The community was a safety net, woven from countless threads of mutual responsibility. If a child fell, a dozen hands would be there to lift them up. Of course, I had to ask the big question. Has it always been like this? Has there never been a crime, a betrayal? Alara, the innkeeper, sat with me one evening as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. She told me the story. Generations ago, Ethelgard was like any other place. There were locks, and there was suspicion. But a harsh winter and a devastating famine changed everything. Then, a village elder, a woman whose name is now legendary, made a radical proposition. She gathered everyone in the square and opened her own pantry, sharing the last of her family's food. She argued that they would either survive together or perish apart. It was a huge risk, but one by one, other families followed her lead. They pooled their resources, shared their warmth, and worked together to survive the winter. They learned a powerful lesson in that brutal season. The lock on your door is also a wall that keeps help out. When spring came, they didn't just rebuild their homes, they rebuilt their society. They made a pact: no more locks, no more secrets. They would live as if they were one family. bound by shared vulnerability and mutual trust. It was a conscious choice, a social contract renewed every single day, with every open door. But what about outsiders? What about people like me? We trust first, Finn, the carpenter told me. When you walked into this village, we didn't see a threat. We saw a guest. We offer you our trust as a gift, but breaking it would hurt you far more than it would hurt us. I've thought about that. To steal from someone who has offered you nothing but openness. The shame would be a heavier burden than any stolen object. Their trust wasn't naive. It was a powerful deterrent. It was a challenge to your own character. It asked you, what kind of person are you? One day, a young traveler, a backpacker, did something foolish. He got drunk at the small tavern and tried to sneak away with the inn's silver teapot, a family heirloom. It was called not by a police officer, because there are none, but by a child who saw him and simply asked. The shame on the young man's face was profound, but what happened next was the most surprising part. There was no jail, no punishment in the way we'd understand it. The village council, made up of elders, sat with him. They didn't shout or condemn. They asked him why. They listened to his story of hardship and desperation. Then, they gave him a choice. He could leave the village and never return, or he could stay and work to earn back the trust he had broken. He chose to stay. I saw him a few days later, sanding a chair, his expression a mix of humility and quiet determination. They weren't punishing him. They were healing him. They were reintegrating him. And the community's job is to heal that wound, not deepen Italiano. My final days in Ethelgard were transformative. I stopped wedging the chair under my door. I started leaving my own door ajar. I walked through the village with a sense of peace I'd never known. The absence of locks wasn't about security. It was about connection. A locked door is a statement. It says, "This is mine, not yours. I don't trust you." An open door is an invitation. It says, "We are in this together. Welcome." Leaving the village was harder than finding it. As I drove away and saw the cottages shrink in my rearview mirror, I felt a deep sense of loss. Not for the place, but for the feeling it represented. I looked at my door, with its multiple locks and chain, and I didn't see security. I saw a cage I had built for myself. So what can we learn from a place like Ethel? I'm not suggesting we all go home and throw away our keys. But the story of Ethelgard isn't a literal blueprint. It's a parable. It asks us to examine the locks in our own lives, not just the physical ones on our doors, but the metaphorical ones we place on our hearts. The suspicion we have for strangers, the walls we build between ourselves and our neighbors, the fear of vulnerability that keeps us from truly connecting with each other. Maybe we can't leave our front doors unlocked, but can we unlock our minds a little? Can we choose to trust first, just for a moment? The lesson from the Village of Unlocked Doors is that trust is not something you wait to receive. It is something you decide to give. It is a choice. It's a practice. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If this story made you think, consider sharing it with someone. Let's keep the conversation going. Subscribe for more explorations into the fascinating corners of our world.